we can actually see God more clearly because we are able to focus on God more intently. Now, that does not mean that you won't feel afraid. David did not deny the reality of the shadow of death. He affirmed that in spite of how everything looks in the valley, in spite of how I feel in the valley, in spite of the foreboding dread that crowds me, I don't surrender to fear because my shepherd is with me. My shepherd will comfort me. In Psalm 23, the songwriter's solution to despair and discouragement is Jehovah Rohi. And sometimes in the darkness of the storms raging in our lives, we finally come to truly experience the presence of God. It reminds me of this little boy who was with his father at the zoo, and they went near the lion's den. One of the larger lions belted out a loud roar and jumped in their direction, which made the little boy take off running in the opposite direction. He said, "Run, Daddy, run," as his little legs sprinted across the pavement and his father stood still. He said, "Why aren't you running?" His dad said, "I ain't running nowhere." The little boy said, "Why not? That lion's threatening to get us." He said, "But son, that lion's in a cage and he cannot hurt us." See, fear is often the result of what you're looking at. Are you looking at the lion or do you see his cage? When you're in the valley, are you looking at the shadows or are you looking at the shepherd? Because valleys are dark places, but the shepherd's rod and staff bring comfort and care. Our shepherd uses that rod to fend off enemy attacks, uses his staff to lead the sheep or pull the sheep out of a thicket when they get caught. You are safer in the dark with God than anywhere else without God. You are better off in a bad place with God than what you think is a good place without God. So no matter what happens, keep on going. Don't throw in the towel. God's got your back. But there's more here. And I tell it to you, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Now it takes Darius Daniels to make this point, because Darius Daniels said we got it twisted as Christians. We want God to annihilate our enemies, but it is not the will of God to remove your enemies from your life. And vengeance is not God punishing your enemies. Vengeance is God preserving your enemies and putting them in close proximity to where you are, so that they have to watch you win in spite of what they know they did to you. That their punishment is that they have to watch you win. And I can tell y'all unconvinced, but make no mistake, your enemies are looking. They didn't watch the photos, but they looking. They didn't comment on the post, but they watching. And they're watching how God is blessing you, and they mad. You ought to look at somebody and say, "Don't get mad yet, God ain't through with you." See, it's the presence of your enemies that God prepares a table. In God's presence, we are safe. God is not subject to our enemies. God is bigger than any enemy you will ever face. God knows how to give good in a bad situation. God can make a way where there is no way. He anoints my head with oil. And I know that doesn't mean anything to you, but let me give it purpose. Because the oil was both medicinal and protective. Break that down, preacher. That when lambs would get caught wandering off in the thickets and thorns, the shepherd would put oil on them that would bring healing. But also the oil was not only medicinal, it was protective, because the oil made it more difficult for any predator to get a hold on them because they were too greasy. You ought to hear me. But that's the function of the Holy Ghost in our lives. It's medicinal and protective. And the Spirit heals us, but also makes it harder for the enemy to get a hold on us because we're greasy. I wonder if are there any greasy people who came to worship today? Just look at me and got oil on me. See, he anoints my head with oil, and my cup overflows. God knows how to give you all that you need to live the life to which God has called you. 2 Corinthians 9:8, Paul wrote, God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that always having all sufficiency in everything, you may have an abundance for every good deed. In every situation, in any complication, God has more than enough to meet your need. That's what could be why this songwriter ends this song with the word surely. He could have ended with hopefully. He could have ended with possibly. He could have even ended with perhaps. And yet he concludes with surely. Or in the hood version of the text, sure enough. Last stop on our journey of discovery is that shepherds continue. He says, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Goodness and mercy are like sheepdogs, and the job of a sheepdog is to protect the sheep from predators and to keep them headed in the right direction. Goodness and mercy follow us. C.C. Winans has a new song that says, your goodness is running after me. That goodness and mercy are like a tag team. When one jumps out of the ring, the other jumps in to ensure you get the victory. Goodness and mercy follow us. And I want you to know as I close that they've got a long track record of making things right. I know I've been preaching on Saturday and you ain't used to sitting on Saturday, so I need some witnesses, so I brought you. You know what? How did you survive the flood? I sailed for 140 days in a boat made out of wood. It was tough land. The storm was brutal. The waves were high. The rain was torrential. The animals were stinking. The boat was rocking. But goodness and mercy followed me on board. And somehow I made it. Joseph, you were favored by your father, but hated by your brothers. They threw you into a pit, stripped you of your robe, sold you into slavery. You were in prison unjustly, forgotten by the baker, ignored by the butler, and yet you went from the pit through the prison to the palace. How did you make it? Well, that's I made it, because every step of the way, every time I turn around, goodness and mercy will follow me. Come on, Moses, there was army pursued you. The people complained against you. The children tried to turn the waters of the sea, jumped up in front of you, and yet you survived. How did you make it? It was goodness and mercy who formed the construction crew and built a highway through the heart of the Red Sea, allowing us to walk through wet places on dry ground. Come here, baby. You were outsized, outmatched, ill-equipped, and inexperienced, facing a giant, and yet you got the victory. How did it happen? It happened, Lance, because goodness gave me a rock, and mercy gave me a slave. Together we got the victory. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you refused to bow. They tied you up and threw you into the fire. You should have been cremated, but yet you survived. How did you make it? We made it because when they threw us in, before they closed the door, goodness and mercy hopped in with us, built the shield around us, so the flames couldn't burn us. Then goodness untied us, while mercy reassured us, and we walked around loose in the fire. Come here, Jesus, hunted by Herod, smuggled into Africa, betrayed by the plane, beaten by the soldiers, forsaken by his friends, mocked by the crowd, rejected by the Herod, discarded by Pilate, nailed to a cross, pierced in his side, dying on Friday, and yet he was victorious. How did that happen, man? Well, I'll tell you how it happened. Because all night Friday, all day Saturday, all night Sunday, goodness and mercy were following him. And Sunday morning, goodness rolled the stone, and mercy sat on top, and God raised him up with all power in his Lord bless you. Is there anybody here